إن حي أفلا يؤمنون صلوات عليك. Once again, as I said, it has been about 5 years that I visited this community before. And this is a moment to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the opportunity and tawfiq that we have for Azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada. The phenomena of Azaf for us, the whole ceremony of grief and mourning is actually a reflection of the fulfillment of our duty. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you have to love the family of the Ahlul Bayt, of the Prophet. And one way of expressing our mawadda to the Ahlul Bayt is by celebrating the happy occasions related to them and commemorating the tragedies and the suffering that they have gone through. And this is one way of, fulfillment of the fariḍa that we have of al-muwaddatu fil qurba. Salawat. Before I continue my discussion for tonight, I would just like to briefly, introduce the very first book which was there in the flyer. This is actually the book of my late father, Allama Syed Rizvi, and this is his 25 years of hard work. Unfortunately, we were not able to publish it when he was alive. There was some work to be done, and it took me about 15 years before I could reach to that point of publishing it last year. This is actually, the book is known as A History of the Shia People. It is not more about the biography of the A'imma. There is quite a lot about them. But this is talking about the Shia Qawm and the Shia people. It starts with the era, the events of Saqifa, all the way to the time of the Ghaybat al-Sughra, just to highlight the ashab of the Imams from beginning to the Ghaybat al-Sughra, just to look at the community and the people at that time, and their achievements and their sufferings and the challenges. Then it goes on from Ghaybat al-Sughra, from Kubra beginning, till the days, we are talking about Sheikh Saduq, Sheikh Mufid, Sheikh Tusi's era, all the way to the time when the Abbasid Khilafat came to the end, when the Mongolians destroyed Baghdad. And so this was one unit because it was one empire. But after the collapse of Baghdad, it becomes a regional history. So there is a whole section dealing with Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan as one unit. Then it goes on to the Arab world, different parts of the Arab-speaking world, and then Turkey. And then it goes on to the Indian subcontinent, which is about 300 pages of the book, right from the very beginning, how it's, the Shias reached there and how they spread, and their achievements and their failures and their, challenges, till the modern days where it's divided then into India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And then it goes on to, the Central Asian republics and the African continent, ending with the history of the Shia people in the West. And that is the very brief part, because this is a new migration of the Shia community in the West, and the history is still very in its infancy at that time. So I just wanted to give you a different, because sometimes when we hear about history of Islam, we are only talking about, the early time. This is about the Shia community. And this is his, I'm sure many of you must be familiar with my late father's books on different topics, including the translation of Al-Mizan in English, which he did till about 12 volumes. But this is one of his work, as I said, of 25 years on and off, research that he has done. Salawat. Last night, I began my discussion with one line from one sentence from the wasiyat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam that he wrote before he left Medina, where he described his purpose, his mission, where he says, إِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ الْإِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي. That the only reason that I have risen against Yazid is only one, and that is the reformation of the community of my grandfather. He wanted to reform the community which had deviated from the right path. And as I said last night, Islah and reformation only comes when there is fasad. If something is fasid, you need to reform it. And this is where Hussein ibn Ali realized, and the fasad started right after the wafat of Rasulullah, but it reached to a point with the khilafat of Yazid, reached to a point where it had to be dealt with seriously. And this is where Imam Hussein alayhi salam decided to take the step in form of sacrifice and qurbani in order to save the soul and the spirit of Islam. To understand the deformation or the corruption and facade of the ummah after Rasulullah, I used the example last night about the sanctity of the dead body, hurmat mayyit. We looked at this story from the Quran, and then we went on to the seerah of the Prophet and Amir al-Mu'mineen, and then we went to the events of Karbala to see that just 50 years after the wafat of Rasulullah, Muslims had deviated and become so corrupt and fasid that they had no respect even for the body of the grandson of Rasulullah. No sanctity, no respect was maintained in any shape or form at all. And if the sacred body of the Prophet's grandson is not respected, what else is left there? And so what we see, the suffering of the Muslims by the Muslims till now, this is actually a consequence of moving away from the teachings of Islam as preserved by the Ahlul Bayt. The example of ISIS that I mentioned, this is all connected to those forces who were on the opposition side of Hussein in Karbala. Tonight I would like to look at another example, which shows that how these people on the opposition, from the days of the Prophet and even after that, sometimes it was disguised, nifaq was there, and later on it comes out very openly that they had no respect for the Islamic values, not even for the what we call universal values of human beings. They had no respect for, as I said, hurmat of the mayyit. Tonight, I would like to talk about the issue of the right of every human being to water. And the reason I'm talking about water is because, when you talk about the story of Karbala, water occupies the central theme there. The thirst of the children, the women, and the men in Karbala became the most visible symbol of Mazlumiyat of Hussein and his companions. And the reason the way we carry the alam of Hazrat Abbas with the mashq on it, this is actually symbolizes the deprivation of the basic right of a human being, that they were even deprived from having access to water. So what I would like to do is, just like last night, go to the ayat of Quran, briefly talk about this issue, importance of the water from the Quranic point of view, and then go to the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. Salawat. What is water? In Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually describes water in the ayat that I recited after the khutbah as the source of life, where it says, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. We made everything, come to life through water. So water is basically the source of life as far as the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned. Even when he talks about the creation of the human being, he says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ مِنَ الْمَاءِ بَشَرًا. He is the one who created the human being from one drop, referring to ma in that sense. And even if you look at the rain, this is considered to be one of the general blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a rahmat of Allah, where he showers this to people without seeing whether he is a believer or a non-believer, is a mu'min or a kafir, is Shia or a Sunni, muttaqi or fasiq. When the rain comes, it is a general blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the whole world. And in Surah number 7, ayat 57, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي يُرْسِلَ الرِّيحَ بُشْرًا بَيْنَ يَدِ رَحْمَتِهِ. He sends the winds as the bearer of good news of the mercy of Allah. And what does the wind do? حَتَّى إِذَا أَقَلَّتْ سُحَابًا ثِقَالًا. When the winds come, the main function of winds is basically to push the clouds from the sea towards the land. And when it becomes heavy, this is where فَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ. He says we send this winds to push the clouds inland from the sea so that they would water the dead earth on an annual basis. When we look at the seasons, فَأَنزَلْنَا بِهِ الْمَاءِ, we send down the water through the clouds. فَأَخْرَجْنَا بِهِ مِنْ كُلِّ الثَّمَرَاتِ, and that is how we grow all the fruits. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wants this same general mercy and blessing that He has, sometimes He can even use that as a means of punishing people. The Tufan and the flood of Nuh, we know about it. Where even his son, who expressed his kufr later on, Nuh didn't know about it. He had hidden his disbelief until when he says, فَسَعَاوَ إِلَى جَبَلٍ يَعْصُمِنِي مِنَ النَّاسِ. I'll go on the top of the mountain and it will protect me from the water. So now water is becoming a source of azab. And this is where, Nuh says to him that there is no asim, there is no protector today from this incident except that you come to this ark, which is the ark of salvation. We also see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not only given us water as a source of life for us and blessing for reviving of the earth also, and that's how we get our food, but He also has created this ability within us to exploit and actually control the energy and the power that we can generate in form of electricity from water. So even the electricity that we have actually comes from the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala known as water. And so this is considered to be one of the important elements in human life according to the Quranic point of view also. Salawat. It's not only that water is a source of life for the human beings, for the animals, for the earth, which produces food for us. But if you look at it from the religious point of view in Islam, the water is also considered to be tahur or tahir, which means it is pure. And this is where in another ayat, talking about the same thing, that He sends the winds as bushra bayna yadi rahmatihi, as a bearer of good news for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then He says, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً طَهُورًا, and we send down from the clouds the water which is pure. لِنُحْيِ بِهِ بَلَدًا مَيِّتَةً. And this is where we come to realize that when we talk about religious laws in Islam, water also becomes a very essential part of it. The water is very much tied even to the issue of the daily prayers that we have. The wudu is done through water, the ghusl is done through the water, the way we clean ourselves, and purification, we are told, an-nidafatu min al-iman. One of the signs of belief in Islam is that a person keeps himself or herself, clean and pure. And just let me, slightly just to remind you of history, sometimes we take these simple rulings of Islam for granted. Everybody now believes in purity of the human body. But remember that Islam talked about it 1400 years ago. It has been part of the Islamic system. If you look at the European culture, till about a century ago, the use of water as a personal hygiene was not known. Water was actually used only when the doctor will say, well, you have a physical problem, you have to use that as a medicine. And I'll just give you one example. In 1812, which is not that far away, there is a story about the mayor of London. You know, the mayor of London would be given an official residence, the mayor's residence. And when he moved in, it didn't have a bathhouse. He wanted to, have a bath, a shower. So he actually proposed there the budget to build the, bath within the mayor's mansion in London. There was discussion about it, and eventually the members of the Council of London decided this is not a necessity, and therefore we will not sanction the budget for it. If the mayor wants it, he can build it by his own personal, resources, and build it in such a way that when his term expires, he can take it with himself. So you just think about it. Just about a century ago in the West, this issue of taking bath was not considered to be a common phenomenon. And this is for the young people who think that, these are very simple issues, but think about it, that Islam has been talking about it. It is part of the Muslim culture for last 1400 years. Salawat pradhne ka. And even if you look at this, we don't have the time, otherwise I could, maybe ask some questions from the students who are, I understand the madrasa just ended, just to see how much they remember and how much they are being taught here. When we talk about the issue of water, the water is divided into two categories as far as the quantity is concerned. One is known as Abe Kur, and other is known as less than Kur, which is Abe Qalil, or Kathir and Qalil. And the difference between the two is that when the water's quantity is Kur or more, it is not only tahir and pure by itself, but it has the power to purify our other najis elements. You can use it to purify it. If it is less than Kur, then it is pure, but if a drop of najasat goes into it, it will become najis. And this is where I would like to just digress slightly here. I hope things here are fine. You have the leadership of the Sheikh here, but we these days are suffering from the issue of what kind of speakers do we invite to the centers. Many people ask this question. Because remember, it is not necessary that all the speakers would be conveying the same message. And I would like to use this example of Kur and less than Kur. But before that, let me, add one more element. If the water which is less than Kur in quantity, if it is linked, let's say, with a pipe, with a source which is running water or more than Kur, then that Abi Qalil, which is less than Kur, also acquires that ability to purify the najasat. It has to be connected to the Kur. When we talk about a speaker, and I'm using the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen and relating to this example of water, either the speaker is Kur, the speaker himself is Kur, or more than that, then him, in the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he becomes alimun Rabbani, a person who has the knowledge based on the divine sources from the Prophet and the Aimma of Ahlul Bayt. Or maybe the speaker is not on the level of Kur. He is Abi Qalil, but he is Muttasil bi Kur. He is connected to a source which is Kur. And so he might not be a qualified scholar as such, might not have a training in the Hawza, but he is connected with somebody who is the right source. That also would be okay. But if you have a speaker who is neither a Kur nor Muttasil bi Kur, then you have a situation where he also can be corrupted and become najis and make everybody else also najis. Salawat padne ek baar. Amir al-Mu'minin uses the word, he says, aliman rabbani or muta'allimun ala sabil al-najat. The speakers, either they are alim rabbani or they are students, but on the right path, connected with the right sources. Otherwise, you don't really get anything out of it. Anyway, let me just, very briefly end with this issue of, the basic rulings about water before I come to the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. Number one, the issue of israf, wastage of water. We talk about this conservation of resources these days quite a lot. But remember, this is not only a secular philosophy and thinking. Islam also talks about israf in a very strong terms in Quran itself. And israf, when we talk about, it's not only in all other issues, even in the usage of water, even the water for wudu. The problem we have, all these new, gadgets that we have, we just turn on the tap and the water goes on, and mashallah, I'm doing wuzu, reciting my du'as, washing my face, and the water is just going down the drain. All days you just have to get the water in a container, and then you pour it a little bit, one hand, a scoop of your one hand, then you wash your face. And then you take it again for your right hand, and then for your left hand. Technically, you can actually do the wudu with the amount of water which is just in the glass. And I challenge you to go and try that today. And you will be able to do perfect wuzu, with that level of amount. And then try, put a vessel there or a bucket, when you put the tap on and start doing wuzu, and see how much of it is being wasted. And so we have to realize, even when we do religious issues, like wudu, it doesn't mean because I'm doing wudu, so it doesn't matter, No, the wastage of water, even in religious activities, is not, accepted by Islam. The second point is the issue of, this is basically a basic right. We cannot prevent anyone from water. And if there is shortage of water, if you are traveling, for example, and you know that, you don't know what is the source where I can, supply myself with water, and the time of namaz comes in, and you see the water supply has gone down, it's not sufficient for yourself, your co-travelers, or even the animal that who are traveling with you, then the Sharia says don't use the water for wudu, rather do tayammum. This is where we are talking about the rights of not only human beings but even animals in this matter. Amir al-Mu'minin has a statement where he says that أول ما يبدأ في الآخرة صدقة الماء. The first good deed, the first charity which will be rewarded on the day of Qiyamah is the charity that people have made by providing water. When you talk about, supporting, digging the water wells for areas in Africa or India and Pakistan or Iraq or other places, and providing, pure and clean water, this is actually a sadaqah where Amir al-Mu'min says the first reward of a good deed will be this sadaqah given for providing water. Salawat. And finally, when it comes to the issue of, Islam, very clearly, even in state of war, does not allow people to poison the water sources even of the enemies. Islam does not accept it at all. And this is where, if you look at the example that we have from the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt, let me narrate to you two incidents from the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wa salam. During the last days of Uthman bin Affan, the third Khalifa, the Muslims who had gathered in Medina, the people of Medina itself, and the delegations which had come from from Kufa as well as from Egypt. And so this was basically a representation of the Muslim, Ummah at that time. And they were very much angry with the policies of Uthman, especially when it came to what is known as nepotism. Where the Baytul Mal was now only restrictedly used for the benefit of Banu Umayyah. And this created this resentment to the extent that, there's a long story about the betrayal done by him to the delegation which was going back to Medina after the peace understanding between them and the Khalifa. And so when they basically put the house of Uthman under siege, one of the things they did was they prevented anyone from taking food or water to the house of the Khalifa. Remember those days, water wouldn't come by, running pipes that we have. You had to go and get the water from the water well in the neighborhood. And so they prevented. They said nobody will take water to the house of the Khalifa. Amir al-Mu'mineen was definitely opposed to the policies of Uthman. He expressed it, openly, even to the Khalifa himself many times, to the extent that he was, in a way, exiled many times from the city of Medina, and he was asked through the friends of Ali. The Khalifa would ask Ali that, I don't like you to stay in the city. Go to your property, which is there in Yambu, which is outside Medina. And so the opposition of Ali against the policies of Uthman was very well known. Even later on, in one of his very early khutbahs, known as Khutbah Shiqshaqiyya, the third khutbah, where Amir al-Mu'minin in a way has a very critical review of the previous three administrations, his harsh language has been reserved for the third Khalifa. And you go and read it and you will see. He has used very, very strong words against Osman because of his policies. So he was against the policies of Osman, but he did not agree with the rebels and their policy of preventing food and water to the house of Osman. What does Ali do? This is the irony of history. Ali actually called his sons Hassan and Hussein. And he says, I would like you to take bags of, grain, the food supply, and also bags of, water bags, and gather some young, members of Banu Hashim and ask them to come with their swords and take this food and water to the house of Uthman, even if you have to forcefully break the siege in order to reach to the house of Uthman, do so. Basically, he allowed them even to fight so that food and water can reach to the house of Uthman. And this is the seerah which is very important for us to keep in mind. Sometimes we don't connect what happened before with the events of Karbala. And you will see in these examples that, in Medina, it was the Muslims, the Sahaba, who prevented water from the house of Osman, and it was Ali, and Ali, led by Hassan and Hussein, actually took food and water to the house of Uthman. Of course, later on, things became out of control, and those who were opposed to him, they actually went into his house and murdered him. We come forward into history. Amir al-Mu'mineen now has been, chosen by the people to become their leader and Khalifa. And the rebellion starts from Talha and Zubayr, ending up in the Battle of Jamal, and then Muawiyah in the Battle of Siffin. When it came to the issue of confronting Muawiyah and his opposition, Amir al-Mu'mineen decided to go and confront him. And this is where Muawiyah also started moving in that direction with his forces. And Muawiyah actually reached to Siffin before Amir al-Mu'mineen. And they camped by the famous river which is there. And what Muawiyah does is he stationed his soldiers on both sides of the river. And he says, so that when Ali comes with his forces, You have to prevent them from taking water. When the forces of Ali came in, they realized, they are trying to go and get water, and they are being prevented by the soldiers of Muawiyah on their side of the bank, the river bank. And so, what does Amir al-Mu'minin do? And this is the seerah of Ali as well as the seerah of Hussein. In both cases, you will see in all the places where there were hostilities and battles and fights, Ali or Hussein never initiated violence. They always wanted to settle issues in a peaceful manner. So Amir al-Mu'minin selected one of his courageous companions by the name of Sa'sa bin Sawhan, who was a khatib and a speaker and a poet in his own right, as well as a very courageous and shuja person. And he said, you go on my behalf and go and talk to Muawiyah to resolve this nonsense that he has created for us. So he goes, and I'm just, because of the shortage of time, let me just read to you very quickly his presentation that he made to Muawiyah, where he says, and this is just the translation here, we have come to this area, and we don't want to start a fight without first exhausting arguments. This is Sa'sa talking on behalf of Ali. You have come with your forces from Syria and have already started the fight by preventing us from water. You did not even wait for her to sit down and, have any arguments or negotiation or discussion. So what cowardice is this that you have created a barrier between us and the water? You better remove the barriers. So, even Shuja'at is there. He's not being diplomatic there. Very clear about it. That this is not actually courage. You are being a coward by doing this. And if you want to maintain the status quo and want us to fight on the water, so that the victor gains control of it, then we are equally ready to do that. So there's also a warning that if you don't really come to peace term on this issue peacefully, we are ready to fight. Muawiyah considered this to be a victory for himself. And his advisors, people like, all like him, the whole gang. Walid bin Uqba supported him. Yes, we have control of the water. We shouldn't allow them water. And he actually said these words to Muawiyah. This is what I would like you to remember the days of Osman. He says, Ali's forces should be denied water just as they denied water for Osman bin Affan. They're talking about somebody who actually sent his own sons to take water to the house of Osman. And this is where another of his advisors, Abdullah bin Abi Sarah, says, "Imna'hum al-ma' ila al-layl." Prevent them from, taking water till night, and they wouldn't be able to, stand without water till tomorrow. فَإِنَّهُمْ لَمْ يَقْدِرُوا عَلَيْهِ رَجَعُوا. If they don't get water, they will be forced to retreat. وَكَانَ رُجُوعُهُمْ حَذِيمًا. And their retreat will be a sign of defeat for them. And then he ends by this very, crude words where he says, أَمْنَعَهُمُ اللَّهُ إِيَّاهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. May Allah deprive them from water on the day of Qiyamah. Referring to Ali alayhi salam and his forces. This is where Sa'sa bin Sawhan then couldn't really take it anymore. And he turned to Muawiyah and he says, إِنَّمَا يَمْنَعُهُ اللَّهُ الْفَجْرَ وَشَرَبَتِ الْخَمْرِ. On the day of Qiyamah, Allah will prevent water from those who are sinful people and those who are drunkard. People like you and your gang here. لَعَنَكَ اللَّهُ وَلَعَنَ هَذَا الْفَاسِقِ. May Allah send His curse on you, referring to Muawiyah and this sinful person, Abdullah bin Abi Sarah. And this is where the only person in that gathering of Muawiyah among his advisors, Amr ibn As, was the one who said that, we should remove our soldiers from that side of the river, because if Ali had reached here before us, he would not deny us this water. This is Amr ibn As. But what does Muawiyah say? No, he says no. He was feeling, boosted by his fasiq advisors there. And then again, look at the words. The way Walid bin Uqba mentioned here, Muawiyah himself says, La wallah, I will never allow them to have access to water. أو يموت عطشانا, until they die with thirst. كما مات Usman, just as Usman also died without water. So you see how they're connecting their events with the days of Uthman. When Sa'sa bin Sohan came back to Amir al-Mu'mineen and he gave the report, this is where Ali asked his army to organize a group and ordered them to attack the soldiers who were on this side of the river bank. After a very brief fight, when 7 or 8 of Muawiyah's soldiers died, they just ran away and retreated and went to the other side. And when they were defeated, Amr ibn As turned to Muawiyah and he says, now what do you think Ali will do to you? And Muawiyah were forced to say that I think he will not prevent us from water because he has come for some another purpose. Salawat. And so the story of water itself, when we talk about Karbala, there is a history to this whole story of water and the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. And this is where we see even Imam Hussain alayhi salam, when he came to a point which is known as Manzil-e-Sharaf, and I don't want to go into detail, don't have that much time now. But Manzil-e-Sharaf is a place where they stayed for the night. Early in the morning when the caravan was ready to move on, according to Tabari, a Sunni historian, there were a group of young people in the caravan of Hussein who were kind of volunteers assigned with this task of filling up the water bags, the mashq. And there were camels assigned for carrying the water. So just like water container we have these days, there were there would be a camel or more in every caravan who would just be carrying water bags. And so he called those young people, and then he says, and according to the words of Tabari, that this morning I would like you to take extra water. Why? That was not the normal way of doing things, because normally when the caravan would travel, the guide would say, okay, from this manzil to the next manzil, it's 1 day's journey or 2 days' journey. And the water only will be taken that much which is required till the next manzil. Otherwise, you will be overburdening the camels and the speed will be reduced. But at that morning, Hussein ibn Ali says, take extra water. This is where we come to realize that, one of the functions of Imam-e-Nur is that they would use their ilm-e-ghaib and the special powers whenever they see there is a possibility of guiding someone to the right path. Knowing that he will be meeting her in the middle of that day. Knowing the situation, this is where Hussein took extra water. And you know the story, that Hur came, the Imam Hussein alayhi salam looked at his cavalry force of 1,000 men, and he realized they were all thirsty, even the horses were thirsty. Hussein then asked them, have you come to me as supporters or as enemies? The very first thing he does, he calls the young people. He says, bring the water bags and quench the thirst of the riders as well as the horses. There was one person in the cavalry of Hur by the name of Ali bin At-Ta'an. He says that I was the last one and I was riding my camel. And when I reached to the group, I realized, there were people of Hussein quenching the thirst of the other soldiers. And Imam looked at me and he realized that I was really exhausted and thirsty. Hussein actually himself took the mashq and the water bag and goes to that last rider and basically, gave him the his thirst at that time. But what happened on the day of Ashura? What happened in Karbala? This is where we see that the instructions comes to um, from Ibn Ziyad to Hur. This is when Hur sent the message letting Ibn Ziyad know that we encountered the caravan of Hussein and we reached to this point where the messenger comes back and he says, and these are the instructions of Ibn Ziyad to Hur, وَلَا تَنزِلُهُ إِلَّا بِالْعَرَى. Make him stop, but do not allow him to stop in anywhere but in a desert area, غير حسن, where there is no fort or protection, وعلى غير ماء, and force him to camp in a place where there is no access to water. On the 7th of Muharram, and this is what I would like you to connect this with the earlier history, when Umar ibn Sa'd already comes with 4,000 horsemen on the 4th of Muharram, on the 7th of Muharram, Ibn Ziyad sent another messenger with a letter to Umar ibn Sa'd, and in there he says, أن خل بين الحسين وأصحابه وبين الماء. And I would like you to create a barrier between Hussein and his companions and the water. فلا يذوق منه قطرة. They should not be able to get even a drop of water. كما صنع بالتقي الزكي عثمان بن عفان. Just as it was done to Uthman bin Affan. This is where we say, هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان. Who took water to Uthman bin Affan? Not Talha and Zubayr, not Muawiyah. It was Hassan and Hussein on the command of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And today this Mal'oon Ibn Ziyad is saying that we will not let them taste even a drop of water, just the way Osman was deprived. And this is where we have to realize that when we talk about the events of Karbala, this is the one of the strongest element of the tragedy on that day. And when we talk about Hussein ibn Ali was the most thirsty person on the day of Ashura. We talk about the Alam, we talk about the Mashkiza, we remember Sakina and Ali Asghar, which is absolutely right. But if there was somebody who was most thirsty than anyone else, it was Hussein ibn Ali. And the reason is very simple, that Imam knew that the water would be stopped from the eve of 8th Muharram. And knowing that, Hussein ibn Ali had actually stopped using water, less and less. He was not drinking as normal like anyone else there. And you can see that when, Ali Akbar went there, and he faced the enemy, and in the one-to-one encounter, one of the courageous soldiers of the Yazidi forces came, and Ali Akbar was able to defeat and kill that fellow. He comes back. He comes back to the father, and what does he say? Ya abata ala atashu qad qatalani. Oh father, thirst has killed me. وَثِقِلِ الْحَدِيدِ أَجْحَدَنِي, and the weight of the armor that I have has made me tired. Can I get a drop of water? The son has come out, back from a victorious encounter with one courageous soldier, and he's asking in reward only one drop of water. Hussein, who has the vilayat and the tasawwur on the entire universe at that time, but he knew this was his personal imtihan and ibtila and test and trial that he was going through. He would not access his miraculous power if he wanted to bring water from Al-Qama to the tents. And what does he do? How would he say to his son that I am thirsty? This is where many of the young people here in the West do not understand the wisdom of that. Hussein didn't have words to say. And this is where he says, oh my son, take my tongue into your mouth. He took out his tongue. and asked Ali Akbar to put it in his mouth. This is where Ali Akbar realizes that my father is more thirsty than me. And this is where we have to realize this atash of Hussein ibn Ali was greater than anyone else. The one who was there, feeding others like Hur and even Uthman. Today he is so, thirsty. To the extent that even Sakina, and I'm talking about that 4-year-old child, daughter of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that many people call her Ruqayya. This 4-year daughter of Hussein also had realized this level of thirst of her father. Because after the shahadat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when the horse came to near the tent of Ahl Haram, and when the women heard the sound of this horse, who was actually crying in his own way, they actually came out and they realized that the horse has come, but the rider is not on the horse. They realize Hussein has been killed. But according to the narration that we have, Sakina goes to the horse and start talking. This was a way of expressing her own feelings. You know what she asked? The only thing she asked the horse, she said, "Oh horse, tell me, when my father was killed, did he get water before his shahadat or not?" And this is where we see Imam Hussein alayhi salam, even in another narration that we have, that Sakina, when she went to see the body of her father, and for a moment she went into this state of, dreaming there. Imam Hussein alayhi salam says to her that when you see my Shias, give them my message. Because Hussein wanted to tie his memory with us through water, which is a daily event for us. Where he says, Ya Shi'atum ma in sharibtum ma azbin. Oh my Shias, whenever you drink the fresh water, always remember me. Remember my son. Remember my infant who actually gave his life just because I'd gone to the enemy to ask for water for my 6-month-old son. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our ibadat of this Quran and zikr of Ahlul Bayt. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our tawfiqat, forgive our sins. May Allah keep all the Shias of Ali in His protection. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala neutralize all these sources of the takfiri forces in the world. May Allah hasten the appearance of the Imam أجل الله تعالى فرج الشريف. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك